The arrow hit the mill post 2 inches from Reuben Garrison's ear, and the woman who had fired it was already knocking a second shaft before he could open his mouth. She stood in the shallows of the Greyvane River, knee-deep, her boots up on the bank beside her, green-gray skin catching the afternoon light like river stone polished smooth. 6 copper-colored braids fell past her collarbones, each one wound tight with thin cord and a single iron bead at the tip. She was tall, nearly a head taller than Reuben, who was not a short man, and she wore snug travel leathers the color of dark earth, a fitted bodice laced from sternum to hip over a long-sleeved undershirt of rust-colored linen, close-cut trousers tucked into knee-high boots she had sensibly pulled off before wading. A short quiver sat at her back, and a hunting blade in a plain sheath rode her left hip. She was not dressed for war, but she moved like someone who had seen it and walked out the other side. "That was a warning," she said. Her voice was lower than he expected, measured and unhurried. "The next one is not." Reuben had one hand braced on the post and was slowly, very slowly, rotating to face her. He had been checking the waterwheel bearings when she appeared, and he held a wrench the size of a small club, which he now set very deliberately on the dock railing where she could see he was not going to use it. "I am checking the bearings on my mill," he said. "What exactly did I do to earn a warning?" "Your mill," she said, and the word had a particular weight to it, as if she was testing whether he would lie. "The Fen Post says Aldrich Moore owns this crossing." "Aldrich Moore is dead," Reuben said. "He was dead before I came. I lease the mill work from the estate. My name is Reuben Garrison. I run the ferry and I keep the wheel turning. I am not armed." She studied him for a long moment, water running cold and fast around her shins, not bothering her at all. Then she lowered the bow, not all the way, to the angle of casual readiness rather than immediate threat. "I am looking for passage," she said. "The Fen Post at Stonehorn said the ferryman at Greyvane Crossing would not take Orc coin." "The ferryman at Greyvane Crossing died with Aldrich Moore," Reuben said. "I take any coin that is real." He paused. "I should tell you I am going to reach into my vest pocket. I am going to show you my ledger of rates." "Do it slowly," she said, with something that was not quite amusement but was adjacent to it. He did it slowly. He showed her the laminated card of rates he kept because his handwriting was bad and he had had the wheelwright's daughter print them clearly. She looked at them from the shallows. "That is a fair price," she said, as if she had not expected it. "It is the fair price," he agreed. "Same for everyone." She waded in then, picked up her boots, and climbed the bank with the ease of someone who had done worse. She was even taller up close, and broader in the shoulder than the fitted lacing of her bodice made obvious from a distance. Her tusks were modest, curved upward, the tips worn smooth. Her eyes were the color of deep river water, dark greenish-gray, and they catalogued him with frank and efficient attention, the way a scout catalogues terrain. "When does the ferry run?" she asked. "When there is a passenger," he said. "Now, if you like, where are you going?" "Westmere," she said, "and beyond." He untied the ferry without asking more questions. That was the other thing that set him apart from the previous ferryman, who had asked too many questions of the wrong people. Reuben Garrison pulled the wide, flat raft across the Greyvane in the late afternoon light and said nothing until they were in the middle, where the current pushed hard from the north, and you had to lean into the pole at a certain angle. "You are traveling alone?" he asked, because it was practical information for understanding her passage, not because he was prying. "I am now," she said. He did not push it. He had his own reasons for not answering that kind of question either. Her name she offered when they reached the west bank, and she was counting out coin from a small leather purse, was Morag Ashwalker. She said it like she expected something, a flinch, a tightening around the eyes, the slight pulling away he had seen humans do when an orc gave a name in a human settlement. He gave her nothing but a nod. "Morag Ashwalker," he repeated, to show he had heard it properly. "The road to Westmere follows the river for about 4 miles before it cuts inland. There is a waystation at the fork, dry roof, working hearth. The innkeeper in the village just past it sometimes refuses orc travelers, but the waystation is common land and nobody can move you from it." She looked at him. "You know the road." "I have walked it," he said. "Safe travels, Morag Ashwalker." She stood on the west bank with her boots back on and her quiver straight on her back, and she looked at him the way she had looked at the rate card searching for the trick in it. She did not find one. "You are not what I expected from a ferryman," she said. "You are not what I expected from a traveler," he said honestly, and pulled back across before she could answer. He thought about her that evening, which surprised him. He was not in the habit of thinking about passengers. He had been Reuben Garrison, the name plain and invented, chosen for its ordinariness for going on 2 years at the Greyvane crossing, and in 2 years he had made himself into a man who did not think too hard about things. He kept the ferry running. He maintained the mill for the estate agent who came twice a year and barely looked at the accounts. He grew a kitchen garden. He fished in the evenings. He was to the 3 farmsteads and 1 small village that made up his neighborhood along the valley, a quietly useful and largely unremarkable man. He had been something else before. He did not think about that, but he thought about Morag Ashwalker, the economy of her movement. The way she had stood in cold river water without shifting her weight, the frank intelligence in those river-dark eyes, and the way she had catalogued his face searching for the catch he had not shown her. He went to bed without answers and woke at dawn to smoke rising from the wrong direction. He was on the river bank with his pole before he was fully awake, because smoke before sunrise in the valley meant only one thing in recent months. The Thornwall riders were pushing west again. The Thornwall were not orcs, and they were not quite bandits, and they were not quite soldiers. They were a mercenary company of human and half-human fighters who had been burning farmsteads and seizing grain stores in the name of some eastern lord whose claim on the valley was disputed and practically worthless. They had harassed 3 settlements in the past month. They had not hit Greyvane Crossing yet, but Reuben's neighbor Dent, who ran the closest farmstead a half-mile up the bank, had been saying for weeks that they would. Old Dent was standing at Reuben's dock when Reuben came down the bank. He was a compact, weathered man in his 60s with a gray beard and a manner of permanent, mild exasperation. He pointed west. "Waystation fire," he said. "They hit the Waystation fork last night." Reuben's chest tightened. "Anyone at the station?" "Might be," Dent said. "I heard it half an hour ago. Nobody has gone to look." Reuben thought about not going. He thought about it for about 3 seconds, which was as long as he could hold the thought before it became unbearable. He took his long knife from the mill house door peg, which was the most serious weapon he kept on the property because he was supposed to be a man of no consequence, and he walked west. He smelled the smoke before he saw the ruin of it. The waystation's timber roof mostly collapsed inward, the stone walls still standing and blackened. The riders had moved on. You could see the churn of hoofprints heading north into the scrub hills. Reuben was circling the station, checking for anyone trapped under the beams, when he found Morag Ashwalker sitting against the east wall in the pale morning, her bow across her knees, one sleeve of her rust linen shirt torn from shoulder to elbow, a cut on her jaw that had bled down her neck and dried in the night air. She looked up at him without surprise. She had, he realized, been awake and watching the approaches. "Ferryman," she said. "Garrison," he said because it was his name. "Are you badly hurt?" "No," she said. Then, because she was apparently honest even when she did not want to be, "The cut is deeper than it looks. I have cleaned it." He crouched to look at it. She let him, which he understood was not a small thing. The cut was along the jaw and cheekbone, long and ragged, made by something blunt that had been swung rather than a blade's clean edge. There was swelling around it. He had field medicine from a period of his life he did not discuss, and he could see it needed more than cleaning. "I have proper supplies at the crossing," he said. "Can you walk?" "I can run," she said, with a particular firmness that was not bravado but accuracy. She pushed herself upright without using her hands, which told him everything about her condition that she was not going to say out loud. She did not run. They walked back to the ferry house in the early morning, and she told him, in the economical way she had with language, that the Thornwall riders had arrived at the waystation in the night. that there had been 4 of them, that they had burned the station before she could do much to stop them, and that she had put one arrow into a rider's shoulder and another into a horse's saddle pack before they drove her out of the building. "You held off 4 Thornwall riders alone," he said. "Briefly," she said. "I am fast. I did not fight them, I got out. That was the smart thing to do. That is what I told myself," she said, and the edge of it told him it had not sat easily. He set her at the millhouse table, heated water, and cleaned the cut properly with the alcohol he kept for the mill bearings and the small kit he kept for himself. She held perfectly still in a way that looked like it cost her something. When he had it cleaned and packed with the herbs the valley healer had showed him, she said, "You are better at this than a ferryman needs to be." "I have had practice," he said. She looked at him. "Who were you before you were a ferryman?" He tied off the bandage. "Someone else," he said. "Hungry," she was. He made the farmhouse breakfast he made every morning: oat porridge, salt-cured ham, dense bread with the last of the winter honey, and he made double, because she was large and she had been through something, and because it was the right thing to do. She ate without ceremony and without self-consciousness, which he liked. He had known people who made their eating small and apologetic, and he had always found that sad. "The Thornwall," he said, over the second pot of tea. "How bad is it in the valley?" "Bad and getting worse," she said. 3 settlements burned since the cold broke. I heard it at Stonehorn. The lord who employs them is called Varric Hound. He wants the river road and the crossing rights. If he takes Greyvane, he controls all freight moving between the eastern markets and the Westmere port. Reuben looked at his dock. "This crossing," he said. "This crossing," she said. "You did not know." "I knew there were riders," he said. "I did not know the geometry of it." She looked at him across the table. "You should leave," she said. "When they come for the crossing, they will not negotiate with a ferryman. They will not negotiate with anyone," he said. "Running does not help the people who cannot run." He thought of Dent, who was too old and too rooted to go anywhere. He thought of the Calvera family upriver with their 3 farmsteads and their grain stores. He thought of the valley itself, which had been quietly good to him in 2 years when it had no reason to be. "Where are you going, Morag Ashwalker?" "Beyond Westmere." She curled both hands around the mug. "The Ashwalker Reach," she said. "My clan. It is 3 weeks east of Westmere if the mountain road is clear, 5 if it is not. I have been away a long time. There is a matter of importance I have to bring back to the clan council." "What kind of matter?" She was quiet long enough that he thought she would not answer. Then she said, "I have spent 3 years mapping the Thornwall Company's movements. I know where their supply lines run, where their garrisons winter, what lords they are contracted to, and what those lords actually hold in legal title. It is a great deal of information. The Ashwalker Reach borders Varric Hound's territory from the east. My clan council needs what I know before Hound turns his riders toward our lands." Reuben sat with that for a moment. "You have been alone in the field for 3 years," he said. 2 years and 9 months, she said, roughly. "Why?" "Because I am good at it," she said, and there was nothing prideful about it, just the flat assessment of a person who knows her own capacities. "And because someone had to." He refilled her mug. "How much of what you know is written down?" "All of it," she said. She touched a slim oilskin packet inside her vest. "If I am taken, they will find it. If I am killed," she paused, a flicker of something real crossing her face, "then it dies with me, and my clan faces Hound blind." "So you need to get to Westmere," he said, "and east." "Yes." He thought about Dent at the North Bank saying the riders would come to Greyvane. He thought about the cut on her jaw and the 4 riders who had burned a waystation to remove a single traveler who apparently knew enough to be a threat to a mercenary lord's whole eastern strategy. He thought about himself and what he was doing here, and whether it was really keeping the water wheel turning or whether it was waiting for a thing worth doing. "I know the road to Westmere," he said. "I have walked it." She went still in a different way. "Garrison. There is a siege coming to this valley," he said. "Maybe days away, maybe weeks, but coming. The ferry cannot run if Hound's men hold the crossing. I cannot help Dent or anyone else by drowning under Thornwall steel while I hold a pole." He looked at his hands, which were calloused now in the honest shapes of labor rather than the older shapes they used to carry. But I can guide you to Westmere, and before we go, we can warn the valley settlements. If they know what is coming, they can prepare. They can send to the regional marshal. They have been sitting alone here thinking they are the only ones suffering it. You want to ride the valley warning people, she said, and then travel 4 weeks of open road to Westmere with a woman who has 4 Thornwall riders looking for her, carrying intelligence that a mercenary lord would pay to see destroyed. Yes, he said, a very long pause. You are not what I expected from a ferryman, she said again, and this time there was something warmer in it. You said that yesterday, he said. I meant it more today. He had 2 horses, an old bay called Barrel who was reliable and slow, and a quicker roan mare he used for supply runs to the village. He offered Morag the roan without discussion, because she was a better rider than him by observable measure and a better fighter, and the journey was going to need her at her best. She took the roan without false protest, which also pleased him. He packed light, the medicine kit, dried food for a week, his knife, a short hatchet, and from the false bottom of the millhouse storage chest, a short sword in a plain scabbard that he had not worn in 2 years. He buckled it on without looking at it. Morag watched him buckle it on and did not ask. He went first to Dent. Old Dent listened to everything Reuben said, standing in his doorway with his morning pipe, and then was quiet for 30 seconds and then said, I knew it. He looked at Morag, who sat the roan at the edge of the yard, straight-backed and patient. She knows all this. She mapped it, Reuben said. Dent looked at her for another moment. You are Ashwalker clan, he said. I traded with your people when I was young, before the wars. Morag looked at him steadily. The wars are done, she said. Not if Haln has his way, Dent said. He knocked his pipe against the doorframe. Go on, then. I will ride to the Calvera family and then to Millhaven. We will send word to the regional marshal. You go and deliver your information, girl. Morag, she said. Morag, he said without apology and without discomfort. He looked at Reuben. Garrison, be careful with yourself. Always, Reuben said, which was not precisely true. They rode. The first day was the valley itself, the flat water meadows and mill farms, warning 3 more settlements about what was coming. By afternoon they had crossed out of the valley proper and into the hill-cut roads that led west. The land became rougher. Limestone ridges, thin stands of pale birch, waymarker stones worn smooth. Morag rode the roan like she was part of it, upright and easy, her braids moving in the travel wind. She watched the ridgelines with a professional attention that Reuben appreciated. He watched them too, in his older way, the way he had been trained to read high ground for archers and scouts, the way you never forgot even when you tried. They made camp that night in a limestone hollow off the road, fire small, no lantern. Morag cleaned and reset her jaw bandage herself, tilting her face toward the firelight with a compact efficiency of movement that made the wound look like an inconvenience rather than a pain. Reuben watched her do it and felt something that was not quite admiration and not quite worry and was something in between, something specifically about her. Tell me something, he said. She tied the bandage. What? Why did you fire at the mill post? She almost smiled. It was the first time he had seen anything close to it, and it changed the architecture of her face in a way he found he wanted to look at. I was not sure you were who you seemed to be, she said. I needed to see what you would do. I pressed myself against a post, he said. Yes, she said. Not away from it. You used it as cover. That is a trained response, not a panicked one. You are not only a ferryman. He looked into the fire. No, he said, not only. Are you going to tell me, she asked, no pressure in it, genuine curiosity. He did not owe her anything. He had been very careful about that owing things or being owed for 2 years. But she had told him about the oilskin packet and the clan council and the 3 years alone in the field, and she had not needed to. I was a knight, he said. A minor one, not glorious. I held a garrison posting at a border fort in the Eastern Territories under a lord named Cassin. 4 years ago, Cassin ordered the burning of an orc settlement that was under treaty protection. He said they had harbored insurgents. They had not. I knew they had not because I had been inside that settlement the week before buying grain and talking to the village elder, who was a woman of 60 with 7 grandchildren and no weapons. I refused the order. Casson had me discharged for cowardice and filed a letter of disgrace with the knight's registry. He paused. I left with my horse and my sword in my 2 hands and the name Reuben Garrison, which is not the name on the registry. Morag was very quiet. "The settlement," she said finally. "Was it burned?" "Yes," he said, "by someone else who did not refuse." The fire moved between them. "I am sorry," she said, and it was the kind of sorry that was not pity but recognition. "The people you met in that settlement," he said. "The elder," he stopped. "7 grandchildren," she finished softly. "I think about them," he said. "That is all, I just think about them." She reached across the space between them, the firelit hollow, and touched the back of his hand with 2 fingers. It was brief and direct and warmer than fire. "Reuben Garrison," she said. "Yes. I am glad you refused." He turned his hand over under her fingers, not gripping, just turning it so her fingertips rested in his palm. She looked at their hands and did not pull away. "Why did you call yourself Ashwalker?" he asked. "My clan name," she said. "We walk the ash of old battlefields. It is a reminder not of glory but of what war costs. You do not name yourself Ashwalker if you are proud of burning things." He thought about that. He thought about Lord Casson's letter of disgrace filed in a registry and the name he had left behind. "Then it is a good name," he said. She drew her hand back slowly, deliberately, and they sat by the fire until it burned to coals, not talking, which was more comfortable than it had any right to be for 2 people who had only known each other for 36 hours. The second day brought rain and the hard limestone roads, and they rode through it without speaking much, heads down. Morag pulled a waxed riding hood from her pack and offered him the spare she apparently carried. He discovered she was deeply practical in her preparations, the kind of practical you only got from years of moving alone through country that could kill you. The hood was orc-sized and sat over him like a tent, and she looked at him in it and the almost smile appeared again, briefer this time but more real. "It suits you," she said, completely straight-faced. "I look like a mushroom," he said. "A well-protected mushroom," she said, and turned her face forward so he could not see what the smile did next. He kept the hood. They made the river junction waypoint by nightfall and found a proper inn, where the woman behind the bar looked at Morag the way people looked at orcs in small valley inns, that particular combination of fear and contempt and forced neutrality. Morag walked to the bar and set down coin, and named her price for 2 rooms without changing her expression or her posture. The woman behind the bar took the coin. This was the other thing about Morag Ashwalker that Reuben had begun to understand. She did not wait for permission, and she did not shrink, and she did not make things easier for the people who expected her to be smaller. She was exactly as large as she was. There was something in watching it that felt like being shown something he had forgotten. He went to the bar beside her and said clearly enough for the room, "And supper for both of us, please. Whatever you have that is hot." The woman looked at him and looked at Morag and said, "I have stew." "Stew is good," Reuben said. They ate in a corner table, the room quiet around them in that particular way of people who have decided to pretend there is nothing to look at while looking. Morag ate her stew with the same unconcerned attention she gave everything. Halfway through the meal she said, without looking up, "You do not have to do that." "Do what?" "Position yourself next to me when someone is deciding whether to refuse me service," she said. "I can handle it." "I know you can," he said. "I was hungry for stew." She looked up. He looked back. She held his gaze for a long moment, and then she looked down at her stew with something complicated moving in her expression, something that was not entirely comfortable, which he thought might mean it was real. The third morning they were back on the road before the inn had finished its breakfast, because Morag had the instinct of the long traveler who trusts early hours more than late ones. The road was cutting into proper hill country now, the limestone giving way to gray granite scarps, the birch stands replaced by dark pine. It was beautiful country if you did not mind that it offered excellent cover for anyone who might be following you. Morag minded. She rode with her head turned slightly every hour or so, checking behind them in the casual way of someone who did it constantly, automatically. "We have a tail," she said on the third hour. "2 riders. They have been behind us since the junction." Reuben did not turn to look. He had learned not to look. "Thornwall?" "I think so. Different clothing than the 4 at the way station, but same horse-bass rhythm." Thornwall riders use a particular traveling gait to save their horses for a chase. "Options," he said. She had already been thinking about them. He could see it in the particular quality of her stillness. "The road splits 2 miles ahead. Right branch is the main road to Westmere, open ground, no cover. Left branch is the old drover's track, rougher, slower, but it passes through the Fengate breaks, which are a maze of granite outcrops. We know that terrain and they do not." "You know that terrain," he corrected. "Do you trust me with it?" she asked, and the question was direct. "Without question," he said immediately. She glanced at him, just a glance, but something moved in it. They took the left branch. Morag rode ahead into the Fengate breaks, and whatever she was to him by then, companion, ally, the most interesting person he had shared a fire with in years. She was in her element here in a way that made him feel he was watching a different creature entirely. She read the granite mazes like text, threading between the outcrops with a certainty that was not guesswork. She pulled them into a deep notch between 2 leaning slabs, and they waited, still and quiet, while the 2 riders came past on the main road visible through a gap in the rock. 2 men in leather coats with the Thornwall's Eastern mark badging on the shoulder. They rode past the left branch without stopping, following the main road. Morag let out one slow breath. Reuben let out the breath he had been holding for 10 minutes. "Good call," he said. "Good road," she said. "The drover's track will add half a day. We should move." They moved. The half-day added was a half-day of rough granite paths and pine shadow and a cold stream crossing at the break's north exit that was shallow but fast, the horses picking their way carefully across. Morag was in the water ahead of him when she turned and held out her hand to guide Beryl across the slippery stones, and Reuben took her hand and she pulled horse and rider through with a steadiness that was both entirely practical and something else, something warmer, her hand in his a strong and certain thing. "Thank you," he said on the far bank. "Do not drop the horse," she said. "I meant for the general situation," he said. She looked at him over Beryl's neck. "I know what you meant," she said. They camped in the breaks that night because the added road time meant they could not make the next waypoint by dark. Morag built the fire in the old orc traveler's way, which used half the wood for twice the heat, and she made tea from a packet she carried that was not anything Reuben recognized, something dark and slightly sweet that she handed him without comment. He drank it. It was good. "Tell me about your clan," he said. She was quiet for a moment, the way she got quiet when something mattered rather than when something was not worth saying. "The Ashwalker Reach is a valley in the eastern range. High country, colder than this. We have had our lands there for 400 years. Before the wars we traded with the river people, humans mostly. We sold furs and ironwork. The wars took that." She paused. Varric Hound's grandfather started the wars. He called them a pacification campaign. We call them what they were. "Yes," he said. "My clan survived," she said. "We retreated into the high country and held. But the eastern range is not farming land. We have been lean for 20 years. Hound Jr. wants to finish what Hound grandfather started, take the eastern range for its mineral rights. He has been building toward it for a decade. The Thornwall Company is his hammer." She looked at the fire. "The information I carry can stop him. If the regional marshal and the clan council can coordinate, if they can show the eastern lords that Hound's legal claims are fraudulent and his mercenaries are operating outside any recognized contract, he loses his backing. He is not strong enough without his backers. You have been alone in enemy-adjacent territory for 3 years building a legal case," Reuben said. "Among other things," she said. "Morag." "What?" "That is extraordinary." She met his eyes, and something flickered across her face that might have been, in a different person, embarrassment. On her, it looked more like being momentarily naked. "Someone had to do it," she said again. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. The fire was between them, and he looked at her across it. "Who takes care of you while you are doing the thing someone has to do?" The question landed in the air between them and sat there. She did not answer it for a long time. She looked into the fire, and then she looked at him, and he could see her deciding something, working through it the way she worked through terrain and options. "No one," she said finally. "That is the answer." "I know," he said. That was not a rhetorical question. She looked at him steadily. In the firelight, her green-gray skin had warmth in it, the copper of her braids catching the orange light, the new bandage at her jaw white and clean. She was magnificent, and she was exhausted in a way she would probably not admit to anyone else, and she was looking at him like she was not sure what category to put him in. "What are you saying, Garrison?" she said. "I am not sure yet," he said honestly, "but I think I am saying that someone should." She held his gaze for a long, charged moment. Then she said, "Get some sleep, we have a hard road tomorrow." He slept, but not for a while. The fourth day brought them out of the breaks and onto the broader road westward, and the fifth day showed them the first glimpse of Westmere's salt towers over the ridge. They were 4 days from the Greyvane crossing and 40 miles of road ahead of them, and something had shifted between them in the Fengate breaks that neither of them had spoken directly about, but both of them were navigating carefully. The way you navigate a fast ford, feeling for the stones under your feet before you step. Morag knew the road's dangers by then. She had walked it in segments over 3 years. She knew where the Thornwall riders watered their horses, and where the road wardens posted at night, and which inns would and would not take or coin. She shared all of this in her direct, economical way, and Reuben listened and stored it and asked the right questions when he had them, and did not ask the wrong ones. She had started to notice when he did this the not asking, and it produced in her a kind of comfort she had not expected, the comfort of someone handling you carefully, not because you are fragile but because they are paying attention. On the 6th night she told him, unprompted, about her family. Her mother, who had been the Reach's best tracker and who had died of a winter fever 8 years ago. Her 2 brothers, who held the high passes in the eastern range. A sister who had gone south and not come back, which was the way she said it, and he did not push. He told her about his own people, which was not a long story. A mother who kept a small farm in the eastern lowlands, a father who had died in the First Hound War when Reuben was 12, which was why he had gone into a nightly garrison posting the first chance he had, and what that path had eventually cost him. "We are both products of Hound's family," she said. "In a way," he said. "Then stopping him is personal for both of us." He considered that. He had not quite thought of it that way. He had thought of the oilskin packet as Morag's mission and of himself as useful company on a dangerous road, but she was right. The settlement that Lord Casson had burned on Varick Hound's young lord's orders had been under treaty protection. It was Hound who had pressured Casson to make an example of it. He had known this, distantly. He had not drawn the line all the way through. "Yes," he said, "personal." They rode into Westmere on the 7th day, which was a cold, bright morning with the sea wind coming off the port, and the salt towers of the harbor master's office gleaming in the early sun. Westmere was the largest settlement either of them had been in for months, a proper port town with stone streets and market squares and the constant noise of the harbor, hundreds of people, fishing boats and trade ships, and the official buildings of the regional administration. Also, importantly, it had a regional marshal's office. Here was where things nearly came apart. Reuben and Morag rode into the main market square of Westmere and found it occupied by approximately 60 people gathered around a notice board, and around a group of Thornwall riders, 8 of them, armored properly this time, with the company standard raised, who were reading out a proclamation that named Morag Ashwalker as a criminal insurgent operating against the legitimate authority of Lord Varick Hound, carrying stolen documents, to be apprehended on sight and delivered to Hound's garrison at Redfort for trial. They had known she was carrying information. They had sent riders ahead on the main road, the riders who had not found them because of the Fengate breaks. Those riders had arrived in Westmere first, and now there was a wanted notice with a description that was accurate enough to be a problem. The Thornwall Company captain finished the reading, looked up, and found Morag Ashwalker in the market square on a roan mare, looking back at him. The 60 gathered townspeople turned to look. Reuben's hand went to his sword hilt, which was muscle memory older than 2 years of fairy polling, and what happened next happened very fast. The Thornwall captain drew his sword and said, "Hold her," and 4 of his riders peeled forward, and the market square crowd scattered backward, and Reuben put Beryl between the riders and Morag, which was not a very good tactical decision because Beryl was old and slow and he had a short sword against 4 armed soldiers, but it was the decision he made. Then Morag Ashwalker did something that he did not anticipate. She did not run. She did not reach for her bow. She rode the roan forward, through the gap Reuben had made, and in one motion she swung down from the saddle and stood in the middle of the market square of Westmere, 60 people watching, 8 Thornwall riders circling, and she planted herself and she said, in a voice that carried from one end of the square to the other without apparent effort, "I am Morag Ashwalker, of the Ashwalker Reach. I have documentation of criminal fraud, unlawful territory seizure, and contract violations committed by Lord Varick Hound over a period of 11 years. This documentation is registered with the Orc Clan Council and will be transmitted to the Eastern Alliance Lords regardless of what happens to me. If you take me, Hound loses his legal case. If you kill me, Hound loses his legal case and also faces a blood price complaint from the Ashwalker clan, which will be supported by the 3 Eastern Alliance clans who have co-signed my findings. You have one chance to stand down." Silence. Then the Thornwall captain said, "Kill her," and one of the riders leveled a crossbow. Reuben had been moving for 2 seconds already, because he had seen the crossbow come up, while Morag was speaking, and he had kicked Beryl forward and put himself and his horse between the crossbow and Morag, and the bolt hit his saddle pack rather than anything alive. And then he was off the horse, and he had his sword drawn, and the 4 forward riders pulled up short, because there was a man with a drawn sword on foot between them and the woman they were trying to reach. And something in the way he was standing, the way he had been trained to stand, the particular angle of the blade, the stillness, made them hesitate. 1 second, 2. And then the crowd of 60 people in the Westmere Market Square, which included merchants and dock workers and fishwives, and 2 retired town guards and the regional marshal's deputy who had come out to hear the proclamation read, did something crowds occasionally do when the situation makes the right side obvious. They moved forward. Not all of them. Enough. Enough that the Thornwall riders suddenly had 60 people surrounding them rather than watching them, and one of the retired town guards put a pike across the rider with the crossbow before he could reload, and the deputy marshal was shouting for the full marshal's guard. And within 3 minutes of controlled chaos, the Thornwall company was outnumbered, outflanked, and being pushed out of the square by people who were simply extremely done with mercenary proclamations in their market. Morag was at Reuben's shoulder. She had not moved from where she had stood. The captain looked at her and at the crowd, and at the math of the situation, and he sheathed his sword and took his riders out of the market square in the particular formation of men who are leaving because they have decided to, not because they have been made to, and which fools no one. Reuben lowered his sword. The deputy marshal arrived at his shoulder, breathing hard from running. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Reuben Garrison," he said. "Ferryman at the Greyvane crossing. This is Morag Ashwalker. She has documentation that your regional marshal needs to see today." The deputy looked at Morag. Morag pulled the oilskin packet from inside her vest and held it out. "Today," Morag said. "Before those riders regroup. They were in the marshal's building within 20 minutes. The marshal herself, a square-shouldered woman named Hadwick who had the specific grim competence of someone who had been dealing with the Hound situation for longer than her patience held, sat across a broad table, and read the oilskin documents, all 37 pages of them, in silence while Morag answered her questions and Reuben sat in the corner and drank the tea that someone had brought and tried to be as unobtrusive as possible. He watched Morag across the room. She was in Marshall's office chair across from Hadwick, and she was explaining the methodology of her documentation in clear, precise terms. And Hadwick was asking sharp questions, and Morag was answering them sharper. This was the thing Morag Ashwalker had spent 3 years building, the thing she had walked out of the burned waystation carrying, the thing she had protected through the Fengate breaks and through the Westmere Market Square. He watched her defend it with the same quality of stillness she brought to everything, and felt something large and warm moving in his chest. He was in serious trouble. He had been in serious trouble since somewhere around the second campfire, probably, but he was only looking at it straight now. Marshall Hadwick put down the last page. "This is sufficient," she said. "Combined with the report from the Greyvane Valley settlements, which arrived this morning by fast rider, it is more than sufficient. I am transmitting an arrest warrant for Varick Halm and a stand-down order to the Thornwall Company by tonight." Morag let out a breath that was almost visible in its relief. "The stand-down will hold?" Reuben asked from the corner. "It will hold if the Eastern Lords withdraw their backing, which they will when they see what Halm has been paying for," Hadwick said. She looked at Reuben. "You are the ferryman, the Greyvane crossing." "Yes," he said. "You brought her through." "She brought me through," he said. "I helped with directions." Hadwick looked between them with the efficient eye of someone who had seen a great many things and categorized them quickly. "I see," she said, in a way that suggested she saw more than he meant. "You will both need to give formal statements. That will take the rest of today." It took the rest of today. It also took most of the following morning. They stayed in Westmere at a proper inn. A good one, because the marshal's office paid for witness accommodation and Hadwick was not in the business of doing things poorly. Reuben and Morag were in adjacent rooms. On the first night, with their statements given and the day's tension draining slowly out of them, they ate supper in the inn's main room, a proper cooked meal with actual vegetables and bread that was not 3 days old, and a bottle of something dark and warming from the valley interior. "We did it," he said. "We did it," she said. "How does it feel?" She turned her cup in both hands. The cut on her jaw was healing well, the swelling was mostly down, and in the inn's warm light the scar that would remain was clean-edged and not disfiguring. She looked, he thought, as tired as someone who had been carrying something enormous alone for nearly 3 years and had just put it down. "Strange," she said. "I have been thinking about nothing else for so long that now it is done I do not know what to think about." "You have the clan council," he said. "The Reach, your brothers." "Yes," she said. 3 weeks east of here." She looked at him. "And you?" "Back to the crossing, I suppose," he said. "See what is left of it. Help Dent get the valley back in order once the Thornwall rides out." She nodded slowly. She was not quite meeting his eyes. "Morag," he said. "What?" "I do not want to go back to the crossing." She looked up. "I have been very honest with you about who I was," he said. "A disgraced minor knight who ran away from his name and has been poling a ferry for 2 years. I do not have much to offer. I have 2 horses, a sword I am not supposed to have any more, a considerable amount of practical medical knowledge, and the ability to make a reasonable porridge." He stopped. "But I have not been alive in a long time, not really alive. And in 8 days on a road with you, I have been more alive than in the last 2 years combined, and I think you know what I mean by that, and I think you feel something similar, and I am not willing to go back to the crossing without saying it straight." Morag Ashwalker put down her cup. She looked at him across the warm inn table, and the careful assessment was there in her eyes, but behind it something else, something that had been building since a campfire in the Fengate breaks, since a hand taken across a cold stream, since 2 fingers rested briefly on the back of his hand. "You are going to make this very complicated," she said. "I know," he said. "I am sorry." "I did not say I objected to complicated," she said. He felt the shift in his chest like a door opening onto weather. "Come to the Reach with me," she said. It came out low and direct and absolutely without flirtation, which made it more powerful, not less. I need to present the documents to the clan council. I need to make my case in person. That will take a month, perhaps two. There is a great deal of politics in a clan council that I have been away from for 3 years. She paused. I am not asking you to stay. I am asking you to come. See it. The high country, the reach, a beat. See if you can stand my company for another 3 weeks without a Thornwall company chasing us. The chasing made it easier, he said, and she did something extraordinary. She laughed. A real one, brief and low, startled out of her, and it rearranged her face completely into something open and warm and devastating, and he thought he would walk 3 weeks into any mountain range in any weather to see her do that again. Come to the reach, she said again. She reached across the table, the same deliberate reach as in the Fengate breaks, and she put her hand over his. Not briefly this time. She left it there. Yes, he said. They left Westmere on a clear morning 3 days later, carrying supplies for the mountain road and Marshal Hadwick's formal letter of documentation transmittal for the Ashwalker clan council. Hadwick had also, quietly and without ceremony, handed Reuben a piece of paper that he did not look at until they were an hour out of the port town. It was a copy of his discharge from Lord Casson's service, with a notation in Hadwick's hand at the bottom. Discharge, reviewed in light of subsequent evidence. Casson found in breach of treaty protocol. Record of disgrace vacated. Regional Marshal's authority, Westmere District. He read it twice. He sat on barrel on the mountain road and he read it twice, and Morag waited beside him without asking, watching the trees. Then he folded it and put it inside his vest, and he looked at her and she looked at him with those dark river water eyes. Good news, she asked. Yes, he said, very good news. Tell me later, she said. The road is long. Tell you tonight, he said, around the fire. She clicked her tongue at the roan and the roan moved forward. He followed. The mountain road to the eastern range was a different world from the valley limestone and the Fengate granite. It climbed through progressively wilder country, broadleaf forest giving way to pine, pine giving way to open fell, fell giving way to the snow-capped passes above the tree line. It was 3 weeks of hard, beautiful terrain, and the pace was harder than the valley road had been, but the danger was lower. The Thornwall stood down 3 days out of Westmere, word reaching them through a waystation courier. Hound's eastern lords had seen the documentation and pulled their backing. Varick Hound was under house arrest at his estate, and the Thornwall Company was disbanding rather than face the warrant. Morag received this news with the same quality of precise quiet she brought to everything important. She sat with it for a moment, beside the fire on the fell above the tree line, with the stars enormously clear and cold above them. It is done, he said. It is done, she agreed. And then she put her face in her hands for a moment, not long, 30 seconds, and he did not say anything or move toward her because this was her moment and she had earned it in full. When she lifted her face, it was composed again, but something in her eyes was different, lighter. 3 years of something put down at last. He moved to sit beside her, shoulder to shoulder, the way you sit with someone by a fire when you have been on a long road together and you are past the point of needing space between you. She leaned into him slightly, not much, barely perceptible, but real. He felt the warm weight of her against his side and stayed very still, the way you stay still when something rare has come to you and you do not want to startle it. Reuben, she said. Yes. Tell me the good news now. He told her about the paper from Hadwick, about the discharge review, about the name on the knight's registry and what Hadwick's notation had done to it. He told it plainly, without drama, because it did not need drama. The drama had already been lived. She listened all the way through, still leaning slightly against his shoulder, and when he finished she said, Who are you then? What is the name on the registry? He told her. The name he had been born with, carried for 32 years and walked away from. She said it back to him once quietly, getting the shape of it, and then she said, Can I keep calling you Garrison? Yes, he said, startled into a half-laugh. Please. Good, she said. I like Garrison. She paused. It fits you. He turned to look at her close now, the fire warming both of them. She was looking back at him. "I want to tell you something about my people," she said. "About orc custom, not to pressure you, to be honest." "Tell me," he said. "When a woman of the Ashwalker clan brings someone to the Reach," she said carefully, "and presents them to her family and her council not as a guest but as someone she has traveled with, fought with, brought home deliberately, the clan reads it a particular way. There is a word for it. I do not have an exact translation. The closest is, I have found this person and I mean to keep them if they will be kept." He held very still. "I want you to know that," she said, "before we arrive, so you can choose. If you come to the Reach as my guest, my companion, I can explain it that way and the clan will receive it that way. That is an option." She held his gaze. "The other option is that I bring you home the way I mean to and the clan reads it the way it is." "What is the way it is?" he asked. She met his eyes and did not look away. "I found you," she said, "and I mean to keep you." The fire between them and the stars above the fell, and the mountain road stretching behind them back to a valley, he had pulled a ferry across for 2 years, waiting, without knowing he was waiting. He thought of 2 fingers on the back of his hand. He thought of her standing in the Westmere market square like a fixed point of the world while everything moved around her. He thought of the laugh she had startled out herself over a supper table and how he had felt when it happened. "The second option," he said. She took one breath. "You are certain?" "Yes," he said. "I have been certain since the Fengate breaks. I have been too careful about saying it." She reached up and she put her hand against his face, large and warm, cupping his jaw on the unscarred side with a gentleness that was somehow more powerful than everything else she had done. All the strength and precision and competence, because this was different. This was deliberate tenderness from a woman who did not give it easily, and he felt it through his whole chest. He turned his face into her palm briefly. She felt him do it. Then she kissed him. It was not a tentative kiss. It was not a question. It was a declaration in the language of the body, long and deep and warm, her hands still against his jaw, his hands finding her and holding her, and there was nothing careful about it, nothing held back. There was only the fire and the stars and her mouth, and the feeling of 2 years of smallness falling completely away from him. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his, an orc greeting gesture. He knew by now, for people who matter. He had read it in the way she had explained the Reach's customs. He leaned into it. "Garrison," she said. "Morag," he said. "We still have 2 weeks of mountain road," she said. "I know," he said. "That is not a complaint," she said. "I know that too," he said. She pulled back enough to look at him properly, her hand still at his jaw, studying his face with the frank thoroughness she brought to everything. "You are still not what I expected from a ferryman," she said. "You are everything I would have expected from Morag Ashwalker," he said. "Once I knew who Morag Ashwalker was." She made a sound low in her throat that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else but was entirely warm. Then she settled herself back against his side and they sat together by the fire under the open mountain sky, not talking, not needing to. His arm was around her shoulders and her head was against the side of his, and the fire burned steadily and the road stretched ahead of them, and he thought he had not felt this way since before he could remember feeling any particular way, and perhaps not even then. 2 weeks of mountain road. They were the best 2 weeks of his life. The passes were cold but passable, the snowfields old and compacted, the trail markers still standing. Morag knew the route and she taught it to him as they went, explaining the orc system of trail markers, small notches in stone at heights that a rider could read without dismounting, encoding direction and distance in a logic that was very old. He learned to read them with her help, and she corrected him patiently when he misread, and praised him without flourish when he got it right, which he found, to his own embarrassment, he was helpless to. The way she said good when he read a marker correctly did something to him that he chose not to examine too closely. They were not shy with each other anymore. She kissed him good morning on the second pass, matter-of-factly, in the way of someone for whom this was simply the correct way to start the day. He kissed her back in the same spirit, which was also the spirit of someone who had apparently been waiting to do this specific thing without knowing it. She held his hand on the cold descent from the third pass, not for safety but because she wanted to, and he held hers back, her hand large and green-gray and warm, fitted in his. And he thought of the first time she had touched the back of his hand by a fire in the Fengate breaks and how careful and brief it had been, and how different this was. They shared warmth in the cold camps the way people do on mountain roads when they have the sense not to be stupid about it. He was not going to report the exact arrangements to anyone. He would say that the mountain passes were very cold at night, and that they were both sensible people, and that waking up warm with her arm across him was the best way he had discovered to start a day in 32 years of trying. On the 14th day from Westmere, they came over the final pass and saw the Ashwalker reach below. It was a high valley, narrower than the Greyvane but deeper, cut between dark stone walls that rose on both sides into permanent snowfields. The valley floor was green and gray and brown with spring growth, the river running bright through the center, and on the southern slope there were buildings, not crude structures but something between a settlement and a small fort, stone-founded longhouses with timber upper floors, smoke from a dozen fires, the glint of iron fittings. It was larger than he had imagined, more settled, more permanent. "The Reach," Morag said. She said it quietly, and there was something in her voice that he had not heard before, not quite vulnerability, but something older and more private. "It is beautiful," he said, and meant it. She looked at him, and then she looked at the Reach, and then she turned to him again and said, "I need to do something before we go down." "All right," he said. She dismounted from the roan. She stood on the pass with the wind coming off the snowfield in the valley below, and she reached up with both hands and she began to untie her braids. He watched without understanding at first. The copper-wound braids had been part of her for as long as he had known her, the iron beads clicking faintly when she moved, the tight coils an exact part of how she presented herself to the world. She unwound one, then another, then the rest, working without hurry, her fingers quick and sure. The braids loosened and fell, and her hair fell with them, dark and thick and longer than the braids had shown, falling past her shoulders, lifting slightly in the pass wind. She shook it out, and then she turned to look at him. He looked back at her, and then he looked at what she had done, and something told him this was not nothing, something in the careful way she had done it, the deliberateness. "Tell me what that means," he said, "please." She held his gaze. "Among my people," she said, "an Ashwalker woman wears her braids in the field, traveling, fighting, working, always braided, tight and closed. That is what you show the world when you are alone in it." She paused. When an Ashwalker woman unbinds her hair in front of a man, not from necessity, not from accident, it means she is done being alone in it. It means she is choosing someone to stand beside. It is public declaration. She looked at the valley below, the Reach, the smoke from the fires. "When I walk down into my clan with my hair unbound and you beside me, everyone will understand what I am saying." He stood on the pass with the wind around both of them and the valley below, and her hair loose and dark and moving in the cold air, and he felt something cresting in him that he did not have words for in any language. "You unbound your braids for me," he said. "Yes," she said. "Before we descended to your clan on the pass, where only I could see." "Yes," she said. "I wanted you to know first before anyone else saw. I wanted to give that to you." She met his eyes fully. "The valley can read the meaning when we arrive, but the moment that was for you." He was off barrel's back and standing in front of her without quite knowing he had decided to move. He put both hands on her face, her jaw, her hair, and she leaned into it, her eyes level with his because of her height, and her expression was open in a way he had seen only in pieces before, that had been given to him in fragments, the almost smile, the laughed out of herself, the hand against his face on the fell. All of it was here at once, all together, and he understood for the first time exactly what it cost her to be this open, and exactly how much he mattered to her. "Morag," he said. "What?" she said, voice lower. "I am going to walk into that valley as yours," he said. "And I need you to know it is not because I am swept up in the road and the mountain and the month of extraordinary events. I need you to know I thought about it with everything I have, and I would choose this. I would choose you, in any weather and any road at any crossing." She kissed him on the pass with both hands in his coat and the wind coming off the snowfield, and it was a different kiss than the first one, deeper and slower and certain in the way of things that have been decided past the point of uncertainty. It lasted a long time. The horses stood patiently. When they separated, foreheads together, her hair loose and moving in the cold air, she said, "We should go down." "Yes," he said. "Are you ready?" "I have been ready since a mill post got an arrow stuck in it," he said, and she laughed again, that real full laugh, startled and warm. They descended into the Ashwalker Reach together. He saw the moment the first clan member at the outermost longhouse looked up and saw Morag coming down the pass slope with her hair unbound and a man beside her, and he saw the particular stillness that came over that person, the quality of attention shifting. By the time they reached the valley floor, there were people coming out of the longhouses. Not a crowd, but a gathering. The quiet, purposeful movement of a community who knew what they were seeing. Morag rode the roan, and she did not hurry and she did not explain. She let them look. She let them read. Reuben rode barrel at her left, which he now understood was the traditional place. She had told him on the road that the left side was the sword side, and bringing someone on your left was bringing them to guard and be guarded. He did not have to put it together. She had already put it together for him. An older man came to the front of the gathering as they dismounted. He had Morag's coloring but larger, a man of perhaps 60 with a broad face and 2 white braids hanging to his chest. He looked at Reuben for a long moment, then at Morag, then at her hair. He said something in the clan language that Reuben did not speak. Morag said something back, short and clear. The old man looked at Reuben again. He had the eyes of someone taking a final measurement. Then he said in valley-accented common speech, "Ashwalker Reach welcomes you." "Thank you," Reuben said. "I am glad to be here." The old man looked at Morag one more time with something in his face that was not entirely readable but was at least a tenth pride. He stepped aside. A woman about Morag's age, with the same green-gray skin and 3 braids instead of 6, pushed through to them and grabbed Morag by both arms and said something rapid and emphatic in the clan language, looking between her and Reuben several times. Morag said something back that made the woman laugh and clap her shoulder. "My cousin," Morag said to Reuben. "She says she thought you would be taller. What did you tell her?" "I told her I thought so too, but it turns out tall was not the part I needed," she said, completely straight-faced. He stared at her. "You are terrible," he said. "Yes," she said. "You knew this." The clan council met 2 days later, and Reuben sat at the edge of it while Morag presented her 37 pages of documentation and her 3 years of field findings to a room of 7 clan elders. And he watched her hold that room with the same quality she had held the Westmere Market Square, absolute, grounded, unimpeachable. The old man with the white braids was on the council. He asked the sharpest questions and she answered them the sharpest. And at one point the exchange became heated and rapid in the clan tongue, and Reuben could not follow it. But he could see that she was winning. And by the end of the session, the eldest of the 7, a woman of perhaps 80 who moved like iron, had set her seal on the acknowledgement of the documentation and the transmittal to the Eastern Alliance. Morag came out of the council room and sat down next to him on the bench in the outer hall and put her head back against the stone wall and closed her eyes for exactly 30 seconds. He put his hand over hers on the bench. She turned her hand under his. "Done," he said. "Done," she said. That night there was food and fire and the clan gathered, because the Ashwalker Reach understood how to celebrate the things worth celebrating. And there was something that was not quite music but was adjacent to it, low, rhythmic, and complex, and food that was not what he knew but was good and warm and plentiful, and Morag at his side with her hair still unbound, which he understood now was not going to be rebraided until she chose to, which was her own business and hers to decide. She braided it herself on the 6th morning in the Reach, sitting in the early light of the room he had been given, which was adjacent to hers because that was how the clan had arranged it and how Morag had not protested. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor with a small pot of the braiding wax and her fingers working through the first braid when he woke and saw her. "May I?" he asked. She looked at him over her shoulder. "Do you know how to braid?" "I know the general concept," he said. She gave him the first braid to hold while she worked the others, and their hands moved together in the morning light, and she told him what each braid meant in the Ashwalker tradition. Not just the closed or open convention, but the whole language of it, the cord colors and the bead materials, and the specific number for different states of life. 6 braids, she told him, meant a woman who was whole and complete in herself but had left a space, a gap in the pattern that was not absence but readiness. "What do you add?" he asked. "When you are not alone anymore." She was quiet for a moment. She finished the 5th braid and started the 6th. "There is a cord," she said. "It is given. The person you choose gives you a cord to braid in. Their color, their choice, it goes into the first braid." He looked at the first braid. She had left it undone, waiting. "What color?" he asked. "Whatever you choose," she said. "You would not know the convention. Any color you pick will be read as the cord giver's character." He thought about it. "Green," he said. "River green." She turned to look at him. "River green," she said. "Where I found you," he said, "standing in the Greyvane." She turned back to the braid, and he could not see her face, but he could see her shoulders, and something in them had changed, something that was warm and unguarded. They found a green cord among the small supplies she kept in her pack, not river-colored exactly, more the gray-green of deep water, which was closer to right, and she braided it into the first plait with the iron bead at the tip, and she wore it. The days at the reach had a shape that he settled into more easily than he expected. The clan was not what he had been prepared for by the years of post-war prejudice he had breathed in without choosing to. They were not a people defined by fierceness or war capability, though they had both. They were a people defined by precision and endurance, by the specific toughness of communities who had held a hard valley for 400 years without outside help. They made good iron. They kept meticulous records. They argued loudly and decided collectively, and held to decisions once made with an intractability that Reuben recognized immediately as a virtue in cold country. They received him with a wariness that was honest and a courtesy that was deliberate. He gave back both in kind. He helped where help was wanted, which in the first week was at the smithy, where they were short-handed, and his ability to make himself useful at a forge learned at the garrison posting, where a knight who could not maintain his own equipment was a liability, earned him a particular quality of practical respect from the smith, a young man of perhaps 25 named Darg who had Morag's directness and none of her patience. "You are not what I expected," Darg told him on the 3rd day at the smithy, which was beginning to feel like the Reach's standard observation about him. "People keep saying that," Reuben said. "It is a compliment," Darg said. "I know," Reuben said. "I am beginning to understand that." Morag came to the smithy late that afternoon and stood in the door watching them work, and when Reuben looked up and saw her, she had the almost smile that was not almost anymore. It was fully a smile, easy and warm, and she wore it for him the way she wore the green cord in her first braid, openly and without apology. He crossed the smithy floor and she met him in the door, and he kissed her in front of the smithy and the yard and Darg and 2 passing clan members who studiously did not react, and she kissed him back the way she always did, fully, deliberately, without hedging. "Good day?" she asked, against his mouth. "Getting better," he said. She made a sound that was entirely warm and pulled back to look at him. "The council elder wants to speak with you tomorrow," she said. "The old one, Grandmother Ven, she wants to understand who you are." "Should I be nervous?" "Yes," she said honestly. "But she will like you. She likes people who do not perform." Grandmother Ven was indeed the most formidable person Reuben had ever sat across a table from, which included 2 lords, a regional marshal, and a Thornwall company captain. She was 4.5 feet tall, which on an orc elder suggested she had shrunk significantly, and she had eyes the color of dark stone and the quality of a person who had seen everything and catalogued it and had long stopped being surprised by any of it. She spoke excellent common speech. She had been, she told him, the Reach's trader with the river towns for 40 years before the Hound Wars closed the roads. She asked him about his garrison posting, about Lord Casson, about what he had refused and what it had cost him, and why he had done it. She asked about the ferry and the valley, and how he had known to help Morag out of the burned waystation. She asked him what he thought of the Reach, and she listened to his answer with the precision of someone taking dictation. Finally, she asked him what he intended. He said, "To stay if Morag will have me and if the Reach will have me. To be useful where I can be useful. To not pretend I know things about your people that I do not know, and to learn the things I can learn." Grandmother Ven was quiet for a moment. She looked at him. "Morag has not brought anyone here before," she said. "In 30 years of being Morag, she has brought no one. Do you understand what that means?" "I am beginning to," he said. "She chose correctly," Grandmother Ven said, as if delivering a verdict. He tried not to visibly exhale. "Thank you," he said. "Do not thank me," she said. "Earn it." "Yes," he said, "that is what I intend." Grandmother Ven looked at him one more time, then at his hands, which still had the smithwork soot on them. "Good hands," she said, as if that settled something. She stood up and left, and the interview was apparently complete. He told Morag about it that evening. She listened to the Grandmother Ven account with the expression of someone who is not surprised but is deeply pleased. "She said you had good hands," Morag said. "Is that significant?" "Grandmother Ven says that only about people she fully respects," Morag said. "She said it about my mother. She has never said it about any of my brothers." He sat with that. "Morag," he said. "Reuben," she said. "I want to be very clear about something," he said. She looked at him across the fire in the outdoor common area where the clan gathered in the evenings, her hair braided with the green cord, her dark eyes steady on his. "I am not here because I had nowhere else to go," he said. "I had the crossing, I had the valley, I could have gone back to that. I am here because of you, specifically you. I want to be where you are, and I want you to know that is a choice I am making with everything I know and everything I understand, and I am not going to stop making it." She reached out and took his hand in both of hers. She held it against her chest, over her sternum, and he could feel her heartbeat through the leather of her bodice, steady and strong. "I know," she said. "I know that. I need you to know I know it." "Why?" he asked. "Because you spent 2 years being nobody on purpose," she said. "I need you to know that I see you, all of it. The name on the registry and the name you chose, and the man who pulled a ferry and the man who stood in a market square with a sword between me and a crossbow. I see all of it and I want all of it, and you are not going to be nobody to me. Not ever." He pressed his free hand over hers where she held his. They sat like that by the fire for a long time. 3 weeks into the Reach, word came down from the eastern roads that Varick Hound's house arrest had been formalized into a full legal confinement pending the joint Eastern Lords' inquiry. The Thornwall Company was officially dissolved, their contracts nullified. The lands claimed under Hound's fraudulent title were reverting to their recognized holders. The Greyvane Valley settlements, including a certain crossing at the river, were officially confirmed as common interest territory under the regional marshal's protection. Morag read the dispatch twice. Then she passed it to Reuben without comment. He read it. He looked up. "Old Dent will be pleased," he said. "The Calvera family," she said. "The valley," she paused. "It held." "It held," he agreed. She was quiet for a moment. "Do you need to go back?" she asked. It was a careful question, and he heard the care in it. He thought about the crossing, the old bay horse, the mill wheel bearings, the morning fog on the Greyvane River. He thought about 2 years of smallness and safety and waiting without knowing he was waiting. He thought about poling a flat raft across cold water alone. "I should send Dent word," he said, "and pass the crossing lease to someone who needs it, but no." He met her eyes. "I do not need to go back to a thing I was only doing until something worth doing came along." She looked at him with those dark river water eyes and said nothing, but what she did not say was very loud. "This is worth doing," he said. "You are worth doing everything for, whatever comes next." "The Reach," she said, "for now. The council wants to rebuild the trade roads the Hound Wars closed, the river-valley connections, your valley. My valley, he said. I know it, I know the people. You would be useful, she said. I know, he said, but that is not why I am staying. I know, she said, that is why I can ask. They understood each other completely. That was the thing he kept returning to, not the beauty of her, not the way she moved or the sound of her voice, or the warm solidity of her beside him in the mountain cold. All of those things were real and large, and he was not going to minimize them. But the thing underneath, the fundamental thing, was this. Morag Ashwalker understood him the way he had not been understood in 32 years of being alive, and he understood her in return, and neither of them had to perform or diminish or explain away what they were, and he had not known until the Greyvane crossing that he was starving for exactly this. There was an evening in the 4th week when the clan had one of its larger gatherings, not a council but a community meal, the kind of thing that happened when the weather broke right and the mood was right. Everyone out on the terraced common ground of the reach with the valley green below and the snowfields gleaming above in the last of the evening light. There were fires along the terrace edge and food, and the low rhythmic music and clan members in loose groups, talking and laughing, and being exactly the specific thing they were. A people who had held their ground for 400 years and intended to hold it for 400 more. Reuben sat at the edge of it with Morag's shoulder against his, and he watched the reach in the evening light, and he felt for the first time in years that he was not at the edge of anything. He was inside it. He was part of it. Not orc and not Ashwalker and not clan in the way of 400 years, but part of the living thing, brought in by the choice of a woman who did not make choices lightly. He reached up and touched the first braid, the one with the green cord. She turned her head to look at him. I love you, he said. He had not said it before. He had been sure of it for weeks, and he had not said it because he was waiting to be sure it would land correctly, which was the old cautious habit, the 2 years of nobody habit. He was done with it. I mean that in the complete way, not the road companion way or the grateful for the rescue way, the way that does not have a partial meaning. She turned to face him fully. In the firelight her green-gray skin was warm, the copper braids bright, the green cord bright against them. She looked at him with the full directness she always brought, that frank and total attention, and said, I know, I have known. I know you have known, he said. I am saying it. Reuben Garrison, she said. Yes. I love you, she said. In the same way, the complete way. She took his face in both hands, the warm, broad grip of her, and she pressed her forehead to his, the greeting of the people who matter. The gesture she had given him first on the mountain fell by a fire after 3 years alone. You are mine, she said. I am yours. Those are the same statement. Yes, he said. Exactly the same. She kissed him, long and certain and deep, in front of the Ashwalker clan on the terrace of the reach, and nobody looked away because in the Ashwalker tradition it was rude to look away from a moment of claiming. You witnessed it. You saw it and let it be seen. He felt every pair of eyes. He did not mind. He had nothing to hide from any of them. Grandmother Ven, from across the terrace, met his eyes over Morag's shoulder when they broke apart, and she made no expression at all. But she raised the cup she was holding slightly once. He raised his back. The mountain road to the eastern range was 3 weeks long and 5 when the passes were closed. And in late summer the passes were clear, and the journey back to the Greyvane Valley was 2 weeks and some days. And Morag made it on the roan with Reuben on barrel and a 3rd horse carrying supplies, because this time they were not running from anything. They went back to the valley because the council had commissioned them, both of them by name, in the formal dispatch that Grandmother Ven had sealed to open preliminary discussion with the Greyvane Valley settlements about restoring the trade roads that the Hound Wars had closed. Reuben knew those settlements. Morag knew the orc clan needs. Between them, they held the map. Old Dent met them at the crossing, standing on the east bank in the autumn morning light, and he looked at Morag Ashwalker with her hair in 6 braids and a green cord in the first, and at Reuben Garrison riding beside her with the ease of a man who knows where he is going, and he said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "I am very glad you are not dead." "Both of us," Reuben said. "Both of you," Dent agreed. He looked at the Braids. He had traded with Orc River towns when he was young. He knew what the unbounded cord meant even in the braided version. He said without any particular ceremony, "Welcome home, Morag Ashwalker." She looked at him. "Morag," she said, "just Morag." "Morag," he said. The valley received them with the particular warmth of a community that has survived something together and knows who helped. The Calvera family had the biggest grain season in 10 years without Thornwall riders taking tithe. Millhaven had reopened its market, and the inn no longer refused anyone who had coin. The ferry crossing had been maintained by young Wees from the Calvera family in Reuben's absence, who was apparently very good at it and slightly unwilling to give it back, which Reuben considered a fine outcome. He did not need the ferry anymore. He needed the roads. They stayed in the valley through the autumn, gathering settlement consensus and hearing the valley's needs, Reuben translating the farming community's priorities into language the clan council could engage with, Morag explaining what the Reach could offer and what it needed, and what form a viable trade road would need to take. They worked well together in rooms, and at tables the way they worked well together on road and on mountain, the same quality of complementary efficiency. The way two people who understand each other can split the work without negotiation, because each can see exactly where the other is going. In the evenings they were at old Dent's farmstead, because Dent had offered it and it was sensible, and because it had a warm kitchen and Dent's company was quietly good. They sat at Dent's fire and worked through papers and ate the valley's autumn abundance and went to bed in the room Dent gave them, one room, which he offered as if it were obvious, which it was, and woke in the morning in the gray valley light with the river sounds coming through the window. Reuben Garrison was not a ferryman anymore. He was not a disgraced knight under a false name. He was not nobody. He was the man Morag Ashwalker had found on a riverbank and claimed in front of her clan, and she had been right about what the claiming meant. It was a permanent condition, a choosing that did not stop being a choosing. She chose him at the river and on the pass and in the Westmere market square and in front of the council fire, and she chose him every morning in the gray valley light with her head on his shoulder and her braids loose for sleeping. He chose her back, every time, without reservation. On the last day of autumn, before the mountain passes would close for winter and make the Reach unreachable for months, they stood on the east bank of the Greyvane crossing together, and Morag looked across the river at the mill house and the ferry dock and the old water wheel turning in the morning current, and she said, "Are you ready to go home?" He looked at the crossing where he had kept himself small and safe and waiting for 2 years. He looked at the valley he had ridden in a single day of urgency to warn of coming danger. He looked at the mill house door where he had hung his sword on a peg and tried to forget he was someone. He looked at Morag Ashwalker, who had ridden up a mountain pass with her hair loose in the wind and stood in a market square like a fixed point, and kissed him on a cold fell under stars, and put a green cord in her first braid, and introduced him to her grandmother and her clan and her people, who had opened the door and received him not as a guest, but as the man she meant to keep. "Home is 3 weeks east," he said. She took him by the arm, deliberately, the way she took things she intended, without drama, without hesitation, with the absolute certainty of a woman who had decided. "Then let us go," she said. They crossed the Greyvane for the last time on the ferry young Wees poled for them. Old Barrel and the roan and the supply horse loaded aboard, and Reuben watched the east bank recede in the autumn morning and felt nothing he could not carry. The mountain road home was cold and beautiful and entirely theirs. Morag knew every marker stone. He was learning them. By the first pass he read the trail marks faster than she expected, and she told him good in the way that still did something entirely unreasonable to him, and he laughed at himself for it. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "Everything." He reached across the narrow trail gap between the horses and took her hand. She gave it to him, easy and immediate, without looking away from the road ahead, because she always knew where he was. They rode into the high country with the first snow of the season beginning to fall, light and clean, covering the old stone of the trail markers and the dark pine branches and the granite scarps. The Ashwalker Reach was ahead of them, 3 weeks and some days. The valley and the fires and the clan council and the iron work and grandmother Ven and Darg at the smithy and Morag's cousin who had said she expected him to be taller. The trade road work was ahead of them, months of it, work worth doing. The green cord in Morag's first braid caught the light when she turned her head. He had not stopped being moved by it. He intended never to stop. She turned to him in the falling snow with the pass opening ahead, her horse steady under her, her eyes the color of deep river water, and she said nothing. She just looked at him the way she looked at things she had decided to keep completely, without hedge, with the full force of being Morag Ashwalker, who feared nothing and could have chosen anyone. She had chosen him. He held her gaze, and he thought of a mill post with an arrow in it and a green-gray woman standing in cold river shallows with a bow at the angle of casual readiness. And he thought of everything that had happened since. And he thought that if you had described it to him 2 years ago, sitting alone at a ferry dock in the autumn dusk, poling a raft, being nobody, he would not have believed the shape of it. He would not have believed he could be this seen, this wanted. This entirely and specifically chosen by a woman who burned like a fixed star and had made him her north. But here he was. Here they were. The snow fell. The road went east. He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her knuckles, and she turned her palm up and curled her fingers around his, and they rode together into the white and rising country that was taking them home.